it's the beginning of an era for this channel and an end of a decade. If there is one solitary descriptor I would use to summarize the year of 2019 in essence, it would be supremely underwhelming and a bit blasé, if you will. But if there is anything to highlight that is quite propitious about this year, it would be the fact that this decade ends and opens up the doors to a new one. And for all of the awesome movies, characters that I have recollected and embraced over the past couple of years, I still had to pull through the most heinous abominations imaginable. And for this video, that is exactly what I'm going to be talking about. For we're about to dive right in to the worst films that have been made in 2019. For this video, I will go over films that not only put me in anger, but have disappointed me, that depressed the heck out of me, where I was astonished at how truly bad they were. Also, be forewarned that I haven't seen every single bad movie that was released in theaters, so it's probable that a film that you've hated may not make the cut. Same goes for films that I have also hated that didn't also make the list. The list you're about to see is all based on my personal perspective of films that I believe will harm the potential for timeless stories, well-established characters, and quite possibly become detrimental to not only directors, writers, actors, producers, but the entire legacy of Hollywood as a whole. So I live in hope that you feast your eyes on what I have to offer, because all hell is about to break loose. My name is Luke Nukem, and these are the top 10 worst films of 2019. Oh, Walt Disney Studios, how you never cease to disappoint and infuriate me. What was once an animated studio pioneering the concept of bringing in folk tales and gothic novels to the big screen, inventing celebrated animated classics, characters, villains, developing childhood for all, is now a shadow of their prime, transforming into one of the most soulless, creatively bankrupt, and egotistical film companies that I have ever had the displeasure of mentioning to any present viewer watching. And nothing can be more evident on display than in Disney's diabolical sequel to the ever so abhorrent first installment, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. And you know it's false advertising when Maleficent herself isn't even showing a shred of wickedness. So much for a character whose actual nickname is Mistress of Evil! The plot is a derivative, uninspired train wreck littered with contrivances and illogical incoherence, where things literally make no sense just for the sake of moving the plot forward. Poor CGI compositing on the visual effects, clunky, cheesy, cringeworthy dialogue, tensionless action scenes despite its incredibly high body count, not to mention the fact that much like how the first movie managed to rip off Frozen, it again reaches for the low-hanging fruit by ripping off elements from Avatar, a film that is also a rip-off, and How to Train Your Dragon 2. Disney, this isn't who you are. Get your head out of your rear and focus on what made you iconic and famous in the first place, because this unholy dreck is not what we deserved. Keanu Reeves, you are so freaking lucky that you're in the John Wick franchise, because if those movies weren't as successful as many would initially believe, you would go the way of John Travolta and waste your career starring in obviously terrible films, one of which is directed by Limp Bizkit.
I can't talk too long. I gotta poo.
Unfortunately, you still managed to have one of the worst performances of your entire career thanks to a film like Replicas, the embodiment of every single horrendous, playing with God science fiction thriller that should have been released in the 1990s. And even then, it still would have sucked 24 textures of fecal matter through a spoon straw. Rife with a convoluted and nonsensical narrative that is extraordinarily impossible to follow, with the logic and plot holes at every single corner, egregious dialogue and exposition, it's boring as sin, and its unintentionally hilarious CGI wouldn't be any convincing in a Ray Harryhausen or an Asylum movie. This movie has the courage to set up for a sequel, which judging by the box office numbers, yeah, like that's gonna happen. But you know what? I know what else did.
Take the
That's right. It turns out that London Has Fallen, the incredibly dreadful sequel to Olympus Has Fallen, was such a resounding success that it managed to create a third installment that is just as bad as its predecessor. Gotta feel bad for my 2016 self, hoping this day wouldn't come. Despite the movie having Nick Nolte in a very adequate performance, even he could make up for the amount of unbridled stupidity in Angel Has Fallen. The action scenes are an explosive, obsessive, and poorly edited catastrophe, and the special effects are abysmal. The villains couldn't be more predictable, the performances are a mixture of phoned in and god-awful, in a movie with characters making idiotic decisions one after the next, with plot holes the size of Movie Bob's jockstrap. Gerard Butler, do yourself a favor. Be in a great movie that doesn't involve dragons, because the only thing that has fallen in this franchise is your career. I guess this movie, after watching it, was quite the fallen angel. Despite being heavily reviled by critics and audiences nationwide, so much so that Universal pulled it out of Oscar consideration, I never thought I would live to see the day where a phrase like "depressing to watch" would be an adequate descriptor for a film like Tom Hooper's Cats. Instead of what was originally planned as an animated musical directed by Steven Spielberg, you get the most horrifying load of Oscar bait I think I have ever seen. You can understand somewhat of the intentions in Tom Hooper's vision, seeing how he made another musical adaptation in Les Miserables. But the result is an ultimately laborious musical with all the flash but no flair, repetitive story structure, non-existent character development, subpar production design. The comedy relief by James Corden and Rebel Wilson made me just want to die. And let's not forget about the state-of-the-art fur technology, which brought us also human cockroaches. Human cockroaches. Yeah, sometimes some onstage adaptations are meant to stay on Broadway, and this adaptation shouldn't belong to the litter box. It should be straight up euthanized. Never in my adult life would I ever spend another torturous day wasting my time on a worthless young adult novel movie, especially one that has to do with angsty teenage romance. But when I heard that there was a book to film adaptation that was based on One Direction fanfiction all written on Wattpad, I took the ultimate sacrifice, and I have endured what could be as possibly as unwatchable as the 50 Shades of Grey saga. After is essentially a checkbox at how to make the worst kind of movie revolving around college romance. You have ungodly, unlikable characters who, for the sake of the plot, make the dumbest decisions imaginable, who have no chemistry of any kind, Twilight-inspired dialogue, reprehensible acting at all fronts, romantic YA cliches galore, and a predictable soundtrack that feels like something out of your second cousin's Spotify playlist. If your girlfriend subjects you to this trash beyond intergalactic proportions, consider yourself a war hero, because after is a nuclear-sized debacle. I want to let you guys know something. This movie is not only on the list because of the abhorrent performances from Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, and Jason Clarke, who plays a villain that will make even the worst Bond villain look like Raul Silva. The intelligence-insulting plot with plot lines that reside in the town of next to nowhere, including the dull cinematography, characters, and production design. This movie is high on this list solely because of one thing: the twist. This movie's twist ending is a ludicrous and infuriating misfire, because not only is the twist ending a head-on collision into the stupid skid, but everything that has been established in the setting, the characters, the world building, and the plot lines that could hold some significance no longer mattered. It goes for a twist ending that tries to be as clever and ambitious as possible, but ultimately breaks his Achilles heels at the finish line. And it was revealed at the halfway point. Even the aftermath of the movie, where everything is supposed to manipulate you into thinking that something satisfying just happened, makes no freaking sense. May Serenity sleep with the fishes and never reach the surface. 2019 wasn't bad enough, what's more embarrassing is that it was also guilty of the overabundance of social justice warrior, forced feminism, and forced diversity garbage. And this is the kind of movie that only a filmmaker like Sofia Takal could muster, as it is only focused on pushing an agenda, where every white male in the university is a creepy, misogynistic degenerate, and even the ones that are the voice of reason are villainized. And the villain's motivations and mythologies for committing murders in the sorority houses has to be the stupidest thing I have ever seen this year, that it borders on being a parody, despite being taken so monumentally seriously. But it's not just that make the remake of Black Christmas an unfathomable behemoth of suckitude, for it gets far worse on the other side. The acting is either over the top or atrocious to the highest degree. The characters are idiotic, obnoxious, feminist stereotypes that have been turned into people. The dialogue is god-awful. The direction is an ill-judged, misguided fart. The cinematography is without any authenticity, insipid jump scares, and unspeakably trite action scenes that have been edited by a schizophrenic orangutan. Now look, I'm all for a film with strong female protagonists, as long as it is written well, it is naturally done, and it doesn't pander to any biased demographic. But in the case of 2019's Black Christmas, it just made the naughty list. Now, if you're a filmmaker and you're approaching specific events, you must handle the material appropriately and pay tribute to the victims who lost their lives. However, The Haunting of Sharon Tate is a nefarious, tasteless, and spineless movie that doesn't do either of those things and instead creates an exploitative and overly violent slasher film with despicable direction. Hilary Duff as Sharon Tate is so appalling that offering her a Razzie would be too generous. Repetitive and unbearable dialogue about fate that comes off heavy-handed. Jump scares with the most inappropriate use of audio design and editing I have ever laid my ears towards since The Bye-Bye Man. And an ending that is nothing short of disgraceful. You know a movie like this is horrible when Sharon Tate's sister took issue with this movie, and rightfully so. But you want to know the worst part about that is? The director has already released a movie that is coming out this year, and it's about the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. No. Ladies and gentlemen, as a man who watched the X-Men franchise with Logan and X-Men First Class being the best ones, let me start off this minuscule diatribe by addressing the following. 20th Century Fox, I'm disappointed in you, but even more so, I'm insulted as an audience attendee, and I'm embarrassed at the fact that you end in almost 2 decades worth of storytelling in the X-Men universe, and this is how you end it. With the worst X-Men movie of all time. At least X-Men Last Stand had the potential of giving us something better. At least X-Men Origins Wolverine, despite Tom Rothman's lazy-ass decision-making, was trying. In X-Men Dark Phoenix, no one was even close to trying. Nobody wanted to be there or even have an affiliation with this project, and this movie from the outset was destined for disaster. Constant changing of release dates, reshooting the climax of the original script, and 20th Century Fox going full-on panic mode after its merger with Disney. It was apparent that these were omens of things to come. And by God, did I call it like Nostradamus. The 4 horsemen have arrived, and did they ever bring the apocalypse to this dismal conclusion? Dark Phoenix is a holocaust of barren and lifeless direction with 0 to negative effort in its narrative. Performances that don't exceed above passable, humiliating dialogue and line delivery, noticeably cheap looking visual effects that you wouldn't find convincing on a CW show, and action scenes that are just tiring slogs to get through. 20th Century Fox should be ashamed of themselves of delivering such dreck, because there was no respect for the fans, the audiences, and even themselves. Sure can't wait for New Mutants to come out. That looks like a classic in the making. But what could be a movie that's worse than a film that cares little about its fans, its audience, and the people themselves who made the movie in the first place? Well, it can only be a movie that is quite possibly the embodiment of hell itself. You probably saw this disaster coming a mile away, but that's okay, children. Gather around the campfire and let Professor Luke Nukem tell you a story. In Dante's Inferno, not the video game, the book, there lies a total of 9 circles of hell. Limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud, and the worst of the worst, treachery. The one that lies the Dark Lord himself, Satan. When it comes to the worst kind of films, it would take a certain kind of movie that is willing to serve as one of the devil's instruments to truly enrage this pyromancer's spirit. Like, say, a Zack Snyder movie like Sucker Punch or Batman v Superman. Those especially deserve to be in the 9th circle. Now, if there was ever a circle to imprison this treacherous, callous travesty of the highest order, it would belong in the 5th circle, because the rebooted 2019 version of Hellboy pissed me off! But also, it put me in agony. Once again, not the video game. Because Neil Marshall, one of the truly underrated directors in the film industry, made The Descent, one of my favorite horror films, if not my favorite horror film of all time. And this is coming from a guy who doesn't love the horror genre. And even his work on Dog Soldiers and Centurion are absolute loads of fun. But he had the opportunity, along with the producers of Lionsgate, to bring us back to the good old days of the first 2 Hellboy films that came out a decade ago with Ron Perlman as the devilish protagonist. However, the final product we got is the exact polar opposite of what we deserve. In terms of rebooting or revitalizing a franchise in the superhero genre, Hellboy is alongside devilish installments like Fantastic as one of the worst superhero films I have ever seen in my life. And you know it's saying a lot when I would rather watch Venom than this movie. David Harbour's performance as Hellboy is lifeless, horrifically unfunny, and obnoxious, and the main character itself is a grating, annoying mongoloid. Unlikable and hateful secondary characters that even you would turn a blind eye towards, visual effects that make Mortal Kombat Annihilation and Scooby-Doo look like Fantasia with baffling green screen compositing. The script and the tone are disastrous disarray, with no sense of cohesion, having no idea what it's doing. Exhausting action scenes that make even the simplest things like gore boring. Mishandled editing and a sequel-baited ending that made all of the fans lift their middle fingers in unison. Luckily enough, this movie bombed before it can even see the light of day again. But if you really wanted to know what it's like to see the cinematic equivalent of hell on earth, then Hellboy 2019 is the demon that needs to be exorcised. And that is why Hellboy 2019 is the worst film of 2019. Welcome to hell, Hellboy. Welcome to hell. Well, wasn't that refreshing and cathartic? So yes, ladies and gentlemen, that was my list of the top 10 worst movies of 2019. But fret thee not, for what movies are being punished to the pits of hell, prepare for films that reside in the halls of Valhalla, as I present the top 10 best movies of 2019. So be on the lookout for what's coming next. But in any case, if you like this video, please like and comment down below, what are your worst movies of the year? You'll also find me on media outlets such as Facebook, Twitter, and if you have a phone, possibly find me on Instagram. And as always, if you'd like to see more top 10s and reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. And you know what? I also learned this new power I just learned recently, so let's give this a shot, just for this occasion. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.